welcome to yet another edition of EA Expressions for the New Indian Express. I have with me Mr. Chawla, who's going to be chairing the session, as well as our guest today, Abhishek Rungta, who's the founder of INT Technologies. It's one of the oldest internet era companies in India. It started in 1997. Which really was the beginning, virtually, of internet in India. He doesn't look old enough to have done that, but clearly he must have been a baby when he started. But he's been very successful, not just as an entrepreneur, but also as a funder of other entrepreneurs, which is something that we will explore during the conversation as well. Our focus in the beginning will be digitization in banking, and really how the underserved in India can change currently. And given the state of the digital infrastructure, what are the challenges that face us? So, Mr. Rungta, thank you for joining us from Kolkata. Tell us really what are the challenges before us, especially in the post-COVID era.
So the challenges are multifold, because India, obviously, on the map of the world, it looks like a country, but I'm sure you are aware it's almost more like a continent, right? So we have different cultures in different parts of the country. We have different needs, different type of people, different types of professions they are into, right? Starting from people who are fishing in the sea to people who are actually Sherpas on the mountains. So you have got people of different types, and they all have different needs, right? So the challenge with Indian digitization and Indian banking digitization is how do you fulfill needs of all this different variety of people, and how do you remain relevant for all of them? How do you create products and how do you get your products out to them so that it is all relevant for them and they can use it and they can actually benefit from it? And it is not just something which is forced by a government or an individual or a group of people that we want digitization. So it has to be relevant for people, and to make it relevant is the biggest challenge.
So, how do you make it relevant? Because people know that they have to have banking, of course, but how do
Yeah.
you convince them that this is something, and that's something that you can do with your smartphone? We do have one of the largest populations of smartphone users in the world as well. So, how do you make them? How do you assure them that this phone that they use to download entertainment or to just make calls can also be their tool for financial inclusion?
So first of all, you need to create products which benefits them, right? So obviously, we have adopted a lot of our banking system and our methodologies from the Western world when they were, in India. We have to understand that what does the different segments of Indian population needs, right? So what do women need? Even women had different needs compared to men in terms of banking, right? I mean, forget about regional diversity. I'm talking about the same city, the same household. Two different people have two different needs, right? So how do you create different products for these people? So you need to go into the long tail of product creation, right, and have to deep dive and understand where are the needs and what are those needs, and are those needs being fulfilled by the existing product set or not. If they are not being fulfilled by the existing products, then obviously you have to invent products by engaging with them and spending time to understand what do they need out of it. So I think that whole discovery process has to be there, and the biggest change that is already happening right now is the arrival of fintechs, because fintechs are those is that a beautiful layer on top of banking, which is basically going and trying to solve the problem at the last mile, trying to understand what a given segment of consumer wants and create a product for that segment of consumer. So fintech will basically ensure that the long tail of the consumers are being served properly. The two other areas that also needs to be taken care of very very properly is number one, the trust issue. In India, there has been lots of financial fraud in different corners of the country, right? Starting from the chit fund scams to a lot of different types of scams that has happened already. Now, people who have already burned their hands in these, they will always be little careful about trusting a fintech company or any other organization which comes and says, you give me your money, right? So I think that would be one of the challenges, and how the communication is done, how the governance is done on top of these players without really making them very sluggish will be the biggest challenge that the regulators have to think about. And the second most important thing that we need to work on is the literacy and the trust issue, because the literacy again is a problem, because a lot of people don't know how banking works, and therefore they are very very open to being defrauded. Defrauded not by organizations, but also by the people who are doing phishing attacks and hacking attacks. And again, these hacking are not like they are someone entering into their phone, right? They are basically taking out money from them itself by taking out their OTP and things like that. And people don't even know that how they can protect their account, how they can protect their money. And the challenge is, once they lose money by putting it in one of these banks or one of these fintech companies, right? The blame would be given to the entire, the community of fintechs and banks, and people will be more, concerned about putting their money on these institutions.
You see, there's a very basic question which arises now because you're talking about digitalization of banking system. There are
Yeah.
different things involved in this. First, you have a money involvement in this. You have the people involvement in this. You have the financial companies involved in this. Question is how to link the consumer banking sector and the e-commerce company. It's a big chain involved in it, one by one. And basically, when Kaveree was talking about financial inclusion, because most of the country is not part of the banking system yet, because you have very small people who are indulging in transactions, 10 rupees, 5 rupees, 20 rupees, and whatnot. Because financial inclusion comes with when you have more banking accounts. You have Jan Dhan accounts which are running into 7 crores, but the money involved in the transaction in those banks is almost now come down to zero. It was open for a particular target, it has ended with that target. The question which I am trying to ask you is, when you're talking about digitalization of banking, for what? One is that you have to bank, there has to be money in the bank first. For transfer of money from the bank to the consumer, from the consumer to the bank to the supply chain, these are different things involved because there no people don't trust the bank. As you rightly pointed out, but the person, a laborer who's getting 15,000 rupees a month, he would like to keep the cash in his hand. Then comes the digitalization of what the e-commerce companies are doing. So how you connect this? Because most of the Indian economy is still 50, 40, 50, 70% is still cash economy.
Yes.
In the cash economy, digitalization is out of place. But I know many domestic people who are drivers, peons, gardeners, cooks, they don't want to open an account. They want the cash money. How they're sending cash money from us, from the employers to employee, it is still that is a story. Because the train full of people are carrying lakhs and lakhs of money and crores of money in one day from Delhi to various parts of the world. It's a cash money still after 25 years I'm seeing. The same peon, same driver, sending same amount of money or more amount of money through some middleman who comes to the village, to his house, collects the money and delivers in his village. So how you face this challenge?
So, Mr. Chawla, absolutely, this is exactly the problem that India faces. You have hit it on the nail, right? So, the challenge here has to be solved by understanding that what are the friction areas that these people face when they are dealing with cash. So, when you deal with cash, it's not always hunky dory. It's always there are challenges and problems out there. And then we have to try to link those problems to the solutions that digitization brings. If you just tell someone कि कल से आप है ना चेक से पेमेंट करिए, people will not start making payments by check. You open Jandhan account, but the usage of Jandhan account is in the hand of that Janta. It is not in the hand of the government, right? So government can only open Jandhan account. Government can only give them insurance. But how do you use the insurance? How do you use that account is in the hand of those people. Now the good thing is that the base has been set, but now you have to start solving problems. So till now banking has been like a plain simple thing. Ki bank mein what you can do is you can deposit money, you can take out money, you can take some loan, you can do XYZ. So the number of options what you can do in a bank was pretty limited till now. But as what I was saying earlier, as we now expand to serve the whole country, the underbanked, till this now they have been using cash. Now for them to move from cash to bank, they need to have offerings which actually solves their problem. So as you rightly said, a person earns money in his town and now he wants to move this money to his village, right, to his family, and he still goes and gives this money to someone who basically carries this money in cash into a van and basically takes it to village and distribute it, right? So I'm sure there is friction. There is a time when he has to spend and do this. There is a risk element involved into it. There must have been issues which has been like frauds into this also. So how does this whole problem get solved? So there are the way people transfer money from Gulf to India, right? And companies like there have been companies which just got formed because of money coming in from the Middle East to Indian market, right? People have been sending those money. How can we create such tools and products in India where the people who are working in this in cities, they can send money back to their families, right? Creating similar instruments low cost instruments which are safer, and the money stays in their bank. Now when the money is in their bank, if they have to use it for transaction, how they can use it? Right now we are talking about writing a check. So having a bank account and writing a check is not something these people can do. This money has to be linked with some kind of a payment mechanism which is on their mobile phone. Now the challenge that comes out here is that a lot of these people have got feature phones, they still don't have smartphone. So I am currently consulting a company which is basically trying to enable the entire payment cycle using feature phones. So again, we are just trying in our small way. There are lots of people who are trying, I'm sure. And this has to be solved. Once this is solved, when you can make payments through feature phone and you can have more confidence in the money that is going out, and you can actually transact and see your money in the bank on a daily basis. So this whole ecosystem has to be built. So there is a huge responsibility on the tech companies, on the new age tech companies, to make it work.
No,
And
no,
and
no, no, no. There is another problem. That digitalization is, of course, very good concept.
Sure.
It is very glamorous in way of thinking. The question: I open an account in a bank and it linked with my telephone. Once I gave it to the account and bank, and I started getting calls and emails from various people because banks are also selling our data to the commercial gain. That is what the danger is happening. I
Yeah.
buy something from Swiggy, for example. Next day, some call comes from other company. So there is a problem happening because people are using the digital platform for other ancillary products. Because I'm trying to buy something from you, but you as the person is selling my data to somebody else. So
Yes.
digitalization is just destroying your privacy.
Absolutely.
So how
So
you prevent that? Because I'm buying something which it is a relationship between you and me. Suddenly I find 20 other people have come selling something else to me. And my smartphone is full of free advertising and everything else in the morning.
I totally get your point, and that is absolutely one of the big challenge, and that I also highlighted when I spoke earlier, and said that the trust and the literacy, these are two major chunks which are yet to be solved, right? Because people still don't trust these channels. You have to become trustworthy, and second is literacy. People don't know what is happening. So if I am giving my payment to Mr. X and Mr. Y calls me and says that you gave money to Mr. X and that money has gone to a wrong account, now you need to send that money to me, and he creates a small fraud transaction out there, right? Just because his privacy was compromised, the whole trust is gone again, right? So this is a inevitable loop which is there, and it's not going to be solved overnight, right? So you cannot make the entire country literate on digital transactions overnight, right? It has taken years even in Africa, and it will take its own time, but it is inevitable. It is has to happen, and it should happen, because without this you cannot bring all these people into the mainstream of our commerce. So there is no rocket science to
Right.
it, Mr.
Can
Chawla.
you
It will
talk
happen, but it will
about
take its time.
Can you talk about the specific digital instruments, financial instruments that you're creating right now? You talked about this very interesting idea of making feature phones accessible to payments online. Are there any other such features that are being developed either by you or that you know of, which will really help resolve these issues?
So there is a lot of work happening on what we call on-ramp and off-ramp. So whenever we talk about a digital platform, right, everybody talks about how do you on-ramp people onto that platform and how do you off-ramp. This means you can put your money into the system and you take the money out of the system. If either of it is not available, people will not feel comfortable getting onto any platform, right? And that is also a challenge with what you call cryptocurrency. A lot of people don't know how to put the money into the crypto and how to take the money out of crypto, and that is why it has also
Right.
a very notorious name, right? It's a scam. A lot of people say like that, right?
Yeah.
So this on ramping and off ramping is very important, and I have seen lots of interesting companies who are trying to create these mini ATMs. In mini ATMs, you go and put your money into the bank and you take out money. But again, I think if you really, so instrument is not a challenge. The challenge is that the government has to start thinking about digitization of money like a startup, right? They have to start gamifying it, but they have to also put the governance in place so that the issues with privacy, issues with security, and issues with the frauds, these can be avoided, because these are the big roadblocks. I would say these are the speed breakers which are right on our path. Though we have to cover this path, but the speed breakers will always put us a step behind, because people, whenever they will be hurt, right, whenever they will burn their finger, they will, for a timing, they will step back and they will say chalo rukte hain, dekhte hain kya hota hai. They will not continue to go ahead and keep walking on that path, right?
What currently is India's status when you compare it to the rest of the world in terms of banking per capita?
In banking per capita, I think India is pretty low if you talk about real transactions per person. If you talk about the number of bank accounts, of course, India is far ahead because of our population and the Jan Dhan
of
scheme that has come up.
population.
But I think India has done a phenomenal job in, I mean, obviously we can keep complaining about our country, but I think we have done a phenomenal job in basically laying down the infrastructure for the banking and digital money. And now this infrastructure has to be now used by startups and the traditional banks. The traditional banks cannot stay away saying that the startups and the fintechs will create the last mile products and we will just provide the banking infrastructure. They should also come up and create innovative products because they have the last mile access. Think about bank like State Bank of India, right? They have got access to almost every village in the country. So such banks which has got massive networks, they have to come up, and they have the trust factor. Because today, I mean, think about it. When you talk about insurance, people talk about LIC. They don't talk insurance in villages, right? They talk LIC karaya kya. They never even talk
Right,
about other insurance policies. Similarly for
right.
bank, right? SBI is like similar to the name of a bank in villages and tier 2, tier 3 cities. So these organizations have a responsibility, in my opinion, to step up and to create that infrastructure and to create that model by which people can trust and start doing more and more banking with them.
So, how many branches does SBI have? Is it present in all, what, 700, 600,000 villages of India, or no?
No, no, no.
So, Kaveri, I don't have that data,
And they are
unfortunately.
about every fifth village as a State Bank of India branch in some
Okay,
villages. It's
but they
about
have a
100,000.
financial,
Yeah, they have the most connectivity in terms of that. The
they have a
question is,
financial inclusion.
because there's a direct connection between digitalization and the printing, the cash in the market, printing
Right,
currency in the market.
right,
And over the last 20 years, when you're going digital, I see the amount of currency being printed has not come down that much.
Right.
right.
Right, rest of the world, you find less and less currency in circulation. But in India, even after demonetization, more currency has come into this market than what it is in the banks. So how you this is the contradiction between what they are talking about and what they are doing. There should be less currency in the market so that less and less people, more and more people go to the digital banking. How do you explain that contradiction?
So, Mr. Chawla, see, these are difficult decisions, right? So, obviously, our government, current government, is being named for their difficult decisions that they are taking, and this has to be another difficult decisions where you have to reduce the amount of currency in the circulation, right? If you really want digitization to go up, there is no other way rather than reducing the amount of currency which is in circulation into the markets, right? I mean, if you keep the currency into the market, it will circulate, right? So, if you really want the percentage of cash circulation to reduce, you have to actually reduce the cash and the circulation will automatically reduce and digitization will automatically pick up. And I think they tried to do their bit. I think they were really ambitious when they were trying to do that push, right? And that did not go very well with a lot of people, and I think they will be more cautious now. So I think, when we are taking difficult decisions to change the habit of our citizens, right, it's going to be difficult, right, for people, for intermediaries, and a lot of intermediaries get burnt in the process. So whenever you do digitization, the point is that it reaches to the last mile and the intermediaries will get burnt, right? So when the intermediaries get burnt, right, there are more people who are going to oppose it with a vocal high pitch vocal cord that this is not right, because obviously they are losing their cut of the pie, right? So this is going to be a challenge because the entire country's economy has been built on middlemen. There's a lot of middlemen everywhere. And again, in fact, I mean, I'm not going to blame it because a lot of businesses earlier, right, even in our community, in the Marwadi community, was all about middlemen, right? They were buying from X and they were selling to Y, and the Y was then selling to Z. So they were basically sorting out the supply chain. But now the digital supply chain has come at least in the terms of information and flow of money. So now when the digital supply chain has come, the old supply chain has to go away. And this is a continuous conflict which is there. So we cannot say something is right or something is wrong. On one side, a lot of people will lose their livelihood because they were part of the old supply chain. On the new side, a lot of new people are coming with new technologies to create new supply chains. Right. So I think it's a conflict of between two ways of doing business, and in which the new way of doing business has to ultimately win because this is the way which makes life easier eventually, and the other way will actually eventually give in.
Yeah, can we also look at things like India Post? They do a lot of banking as well.
Yeah.
How do they get involved in this financial inclusion?
The digital companies are opening up opportunities where people can go in and do transaction using a simple POS, right? So a lot of POS is around if you see in the country now, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. So India Post can have their own POS, they can have POS from different providers, they can have terminals where people can come and interact. So there's a lot that India Post can do. I think they again, just like SBI, LIC, they have a huge responsibility on their head to really drive this whole agenda forward. And these companies should actually become, in my opinion, they should become the platforms. They should not remain just as a bank or a postal service company or an insurance company. In my understanding, they should become platforms for the other companies to come, thrive, offer different products, offer different offerings, and grow the whole market and industry overall. And not just stay where they are, that saying that, this is my product and you buy my product. I think they have to change their business model. That is purely my personal opinion.
No, it's a very exciting idea, isn't it? What would you think would be the contours of this new financially inclusive India? It would not just be the banks, but it would also be, it would also be the insurance companies, as you said. It would also be, the Post, India Post. What are the elements of this?
Yes, so again, I think from a landscape perspective, I see that obviously finance is what finance is at the end of the day is about basically talking about risk, right? Risk means that either I am giving you a credit and that's a risk, or there is an insurance which we are doing an insurance to cover a risk, right? And risk is everywhere. Anything that you see in this world has got some element of risk in it, right? And this risk is more and more in those places where people are not even aware of that. So it's not that in a village, if someone is not aware of a particular risk, that risk is not going to be on top of him, right? So I think the contour is that how do we create a ecosystem where risk management is taken up as a noble profession, as well as something which is distributed to each individual and everyone has access to it, right? That they can actually get loans, they can deposits. And if you think about it, if all these people who are underbanked, if they start depositing money for investments, there's a huge amount of influx that we can easily see even in the Indian capital markets, right? So it will again be a reinforcing activity eventually.
Is there any question you'd like to address to
I'm
Mr.
trying
Rungta
to
in
understand
conclusion?
this because the basic question is again digital India, which Prime Minister Modi started from the beginning. There is some kind of a, I would ask, try to find out the answer how to can become a complete digitalized India, where the economy is still 50% of your economy is still a black economy, and how you build the trust, as you pointed out at the beginning. That how do I ensure my privacy, that the money which I'm sharing with you, the information which I'm sharing with you by buying everything through the digital system, it is not leaked out to various other, everybody trying to pry into my accounts and trying to find out how much money I've got, how much money I'm spending where, all the habits which are known to them. So this is what because people are afraid. Even Gardner, who's working with me for the last 20 years, after he gets salary has almost tripled during the last 20 years, but he's still not willing to trust the income tax. Maybe income tax wala I told you you're not eligible for income tax card. The total income are not taxable. He said, नहीं मेरे घर में इनकम टैक्स वाले आ जाएंगे, मेरे गांव में लोगों को तंग करेंगे. This kind of digital information will happen some kind of fit. One, phone is expensive. But if you have to give them the smartphone which you're talking about, feature phone which they are going to have it, but there is a fear of some unknown. It
Yes.
has to be removed if you want to like India in a financial sector. Financial sector is very private like health. Health data is being stolen now, everything is being used there. And your money data is known to everybody. The Aadhaar is known to now you are connected bank account with the Aadhaar. So people say once the authorities go after you, they will freeze your accounts as well. Because they got the Aadhaar number and you have committed one crime, not only your account will be frozen, even account of your wife, your children, everything will be frozen. So people are very afraid of these fears, which may not be true. But digitalization has some kind of fear that I want to be controlled by a button or some unknown computer is watching me.
Right. So no, I totally agree with you, Mr. Chawla, and it will take its own time. So think about it like a stock market, which a lot of people didn't believe early on. Eventually, people started believing in, and there were cycles. So when people don't believe, it goes down, and when people again believe, it goes up. And this will also be very similar to that. There will be cycles where people will not believe, it will go a little down because things have happened, incidents have happened, frauds have happened, and then again people will start believing because a certain chunk of people will start finding value in it. Then it will start growing up. Again, there will be something that will happen, but eventually, if you see last over 30 years, right, the stock market has overall gone up only. So this I think will
I
also
have a
adopt
point
will
there.
go up.
It has gone up to 52,000 points. but the participation of retail investors has not gone up by more than 30% in the last
Yeah,
25 years.
that's true. Yeah. So
So,
again,
people are still suspicious of who are manipulating the stock market. When the
yeah.
demand sentiments are down, every production is down, sales are down, our advertising revenue is down by 70%, and I find 52,000 index. Obviously, there's some mismatch between what is happening on the stock market and what is happening on the ground. But
And I
that's a
will.
different issue altogether. But I'm saying you have to have some kind of digital India can happen banking after 20, 50, 60 years of nationalization, 40 years. Still, we find the private banks are supposed to be more efficient and much more deliverable. But
Yes.
now you look at the private banks are closing down more often than the even malls. So there is some kind of privatization which is digital, and there's the cost of digitalization, which is the question you have to address. Because cost of digitalization banking is becoming very high, which every transaction people don't know how much money they're spending. The more you spend, poor people don't want to withdraw at one go. They'll 100 rupees one day, 200 rupees third day, 400 rupees fifth day. So every three transactions, they don't know at the end of the month how much money they have lost after their 1,000 rupees to the digital company.
Right.
The
No.
cost of digital has to be very minimum for the middle sector.
It is supposed to be minimum, and again, I think as you have also rightly identified, right, that things are not as smooth as it should be, and there is a huge opportunity for companies because technology makes things cheaper, right?
Correct.
And there is a huge opportunity for the right kind of companies to come and disrupt the market by making things more transparent, by making things more secure, by creating higher level of trust, by taking things to the wider audience. So there's a huge amount of opportunity, I would say. So I would look at it as a massive opportunity because the vision of having a digitally banked India is a massive vision. It's a huge opportunity for people as well as the country, as well as the businessmen, the merchants, the sellers. And it's going to be there. Now, who plays a pivotal role in getting it to that point will actually be, one of the few of the largest companies in the country going forward. So we have to wait and watch. It may not be one of the existing companies that we see and whom we track today. It can be a totally new set of companies which will come in this play, and it will all happen within the next 10 to 20 years, in my opinion. And we have to wait and watch and how this whole transformation unfolds in front of us.
Last question I'm going to ask you, cost benefit analysis, that people have to
Yeah.
assess the
So,
cost of physical banking and digital banking.
Yes.
Because even the physical banking cost is going up because banks are high cost economy. Banks are paying salary to their executives running into crores and whatnot. High cost economy, high cost banking, high cost digitalization. These are the challenges which you have to solve because it should not become a cost on the consumer.
Yeah. So again, the cost, obviously when you go to digital banking, as I said earlier, the cost of digital banking is much lower than physical banking. It's just that the capability is causing more of a problem here. The scale and capability. So India has the ability to give you scale. So scale will not be an issue. If you get scale, your cost per transaction will go down. Your cost per serving per customer will go down. So scale is not a challenge here. The challenge is efficiency of the technology that is being deployed and that is being bought and sold, right? I think that is something that needs to be challenged. And again, a lot of this technology dependence is on, you are importing technology, you are paying to expensive vendors, you are paying to for things which are not required, and those things has to eventually being cut down, right? So I think these things will happen because, see, as I said, whenever you see a problem, Mr. Chawla, I'm very glad that you have identified so many problems, and this means you have gone very deep into the subject. Every problem that you have identified will create a unicorn or a bigger company to just solve that one single problem. And these 5, 6, 10 companies at least which will evolve as like the path leader for in this industry, you will see they will be actually the large behemoths for future.
Hopefully, veterans like you have been there.
uh,
They will be able to find some solution to all these problems. Thank you
Absolutely,
very much.
and we
Thank
will
you very much.
definitely be playing a pivotal role in that. Thank you so much.
Thank
thank you very much for joining us and all the very best for the future.
thank
Thank you, Kaveri.
Thank
Bye.
you, Mr. Chawla. Thank you, Mr.
thank
Rungta.
Thank you, Mr. Chavla. Bye.
thank you.